Hey you, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be wrapping up the how to make your own manga series with one final video where I'll combine everything we've learned in the past. And sorry it took me so long to get to this point, and I'm also sorry for not updating my web manga as well. And yes, I know it's called manga, just let me live. Yeah, summer has basically thrown my schedule into a chaos, but here I go. In the first video, I talked about how to get yourself started, both in practice and mentally. In the second video, I talked about planning and storyboarding. And the last one I posted, I showed you guys how to use the program I used to make my web manga, which is Clip Studio Paint. So finally, here we are. How does one actually make everything and put everything we've learned together? Before anything else, cough cough, make sure you guys go follow me on Twitter and Instagram. The link will be in the description. Do it before you forget. Cough. But yeah. Shameless plug over. Now let's jump right in. First, I'm going to be doing kind of a Q&A session. So for those of you who are not interested, I'll be showing on screen right about now where you can skip to for the meaty part of the tutorial. But anyways, I personally like to use Clip Studio Paint, as you guys already know. And to answer all of you who's commented, and yes, I do actually read everything you guys write, I also use a Wacom Cintiq as my tablet. However, it is here where I want to make a huge disclaimer. What I listed just now are my equipment. First of all, I use Clip Studio Paint because honestly, that's what this program was made for. It used to be called Manga Studio for a reason. But you can really use it for whatever. I know lately a lot of people are using it for illustration too. Photoshop, Paint aside, they also work. From what I've seen in the comments, apparently Meaty Bang Paint is also a pretty phenomenal program, so check that out too. But yeah, to cater to a lot of you who don't necessarily have Clip Studio Paint, I'm going to try and make this tutorial more like a process of what I do rather than just like another Clip Studio Paint tutorial like what I did last time. Now, another common question I've been getting is, what do you do if you find it easier to draw by hand? Well, as I've said in part 2 of the series, I myself prefer to do the storyboarding part physically. But honestly, if you can, take it further and do the good draft with the line art and everything on paper as well. For toning though, I would suggest you to do it digitally because honestly, I bought those tone sheets before and boy are they a mess to work with, or I don't know, maybe I'm just bad at it. But yeah, if you have any questions you'd like to ask me personally, feel free to send me a tweet and I'll try my best to fit the answer in 140 characters. So yeah, let's actually talk about how to make a manga now. I actually have a personal checklist of what I need to do for every page that I draw. I will be posting this up and the link will be in the description so you guys can follow along with what I'm saying here. First step, rough storyboard. I'm not going to go in depth to do this because I already did that in part 2, but for those of you who haven't watched it yet, you should go do that now. But either way, I'm gonna assume you've already done this step and you have scanned the image like I have, in which case simply open the file and fit it into the page. Now the first thing that I like to do is to create a big rectangle like so. There's this thing that printing companies require you to have if you ever think about printing your manga. It's called bleed. And essentially what you have to do is you have to draw past where you're planning the page to end. So that way they have like room for error when they cut the paper. I mean, either way, it's just good practice, whether you're planning on printing it or not. For those using Photoshop or Sci, just extend your canvas a couple inches and it should work just as well. Now in CSP, I can easily cut up the panels to fit the ones that's on my sketch. In other programs, you'll probably just have to draw the borders manually with a rectangle tool or those like custom line tools. But like, I mean, really, it's not that bad. After I'm done that, I move on to drawing the balloons first. I prefer to use the pen to draw them manually rather than the pre-made ellipses and tails, mostly because I feel like those look ridiculously unnatural. I personally try to keep my web series as traditionally manga as possible. Afterwards, I write over the text on the sketch layer with a blue pencil. If you're in Photoshop, you might as well use the text tool now to do the good copy. I like saving the text adding part to do in Photoshop because you can get like more fancy fonts in there. But either way, I believe that you should always do the speech bubbles first before anything else. This way you know how much of the canvas of the panel that the bubble is taking up, and that way you can adjust the rest of the characters and the objects in the panel to not conflict with it. Now, after all that's done, we come to the lining. Lining can be done in any program in any way you want. Personally, I think the lining part is also my editing part, which is why my sketches always look 10 times worse. But if you're not this type of person, you can also spend a bit more time refining your sketch before you start lining. There's really not much to say, so I'm just gonna let time lapse begin. The thing I like about Clip Studio Paint is that after you line things, you can use a tool to change the thickness of the lines you've drawn. If you're using other programs, you can do this next step manually, or you can just always be, a good artist and watch out for the thin and thickness of the lines as you line, but nobody got time for that. So yeah, if you're on a different program, one thing you can do is to use a slightly thicker brush and go over your line art in certain areas. Make sure you guys do this with the balloons too, or else they'll just end up looking a lot less dynamic than the rest of your page, which is really awkward and we don't want that. So I know some of you might get tempted to be lazy here, but don't. If you want your manga to look good, and I know you do, just take the time to make your lines look more dynamic, since manga is like 70% line art anyway. After you finish all your lines, I like to make a new layer above the photo with my line art and add all my blacks and lines and shadows there. Some places to watch out for shadows when it comes to manga is under the chin, around the parts where the hair and the neck, as well as the hair and the ears meet, and around open mouths. I also like to take this time to add more detail to the hair as well, and you can also add your speed lines on this layer, though on this page I don't think I have any. Phew, okay, so this has been a lot of information so far. Give yourself a pat on back. Next up, we're gonna be doing the shading and the toning. I usually use masks, which is like a whole different topic that I can make a video on. So instead, I'll just show you guys an easier way to do this. First up, pick up 3 shades of gray. If you really hate this kind of thing where you play around with the color panel, then find a manga page off the internet for reference. Now, save these 3 shades of gray in your swatches. Every single art program out there should have a function like this. I don't care what you're using, I'm pretty sure even MS Paint has this, so you should be able to find it. Now, before you go any further, first make sure you know what color everything in the scene is. I personally keep, go figure, another list, such as this one, so I don't forget what I'm using for what. The first shade of gray should be very light, since we'll mostly be using this for general shading. Oren's a character in my manga who has light, orangey, auburn, see what I did there? Hair, so I usually fill his hair with this shade. The second shade is what I like to call generic gray, so make sure you don't make this too dark or it'll conflict with the third shade. I like to use this for Kurt's hair because he technically is supposed to have dark reddish hair. The third and last shade is basically a dark gray, but make sure you don't make it too black. If it's starting to make your line art blend in, you've gone way too far. Now for this one, I usually like to use it on dark/dark brown hair or clothes, just basically whenever I don't want to paint bucket the area black. But yeah, now make sure you make 3 layers, 1 for each shade, then simply use the magic wand tool to select what you want to be, for example, shade number 3, then fill it in on the shade number 3 layer. Rinse and repeat for the other 2 shades. If you want, you can use shade number 1 to add some shadows. I used to do that a lot when I was young and filled with hope and wanted every page to look its best. But now I'm just lazy, so I don't do as much, but I still encourage you all to try adding some moderate shading to your manga pages. It does really make it look a lot better. Just don't overdo it. Now at this point, I convert the files from CSV to Photoshop. It's totally unnecessary and you guys absolutely do not have to do this. But at this point, if you haven't added a good copy of the text using the text tool, do it now. If you don't know what font you use, I suggest you to just Google it honestly. But I use this one called Digital Stripe. But it really doesn't matter too much, just do what you like best. Now for the fun part, gradients. If your program doesn't have a gradient tool, you can just airbrush the shade and that works fine too. But in Photoshop, it's over here stacked with the paint bucket tool. What you need to do now is you need to lock the opacity of your current layer, and this may vary from program to program, but most modern art ones have it. Make sure you change it so it goes from your foreground color, which is black, to transparent. Then you use the selection tool to select the part you want to add a gradient in, and voila! All you gotta do is hold your mouse and pull it in to add some blacks to it. This gradient effect is what I live for in digital manga. So Now what I suggest is for shade number 3 and number 2, you can just use the black to gradient it on, but for shade number 1, since it's so light, you can just eyedrop shade number 3 and then use that as the gradient color. Okay, last but not least, the final step is to add screen tones. There's a lot of programs out there that have default ones or functions where they add it for you, and here I'll show you guys an example. In my first page of my manga, I use Clip Studio Paint to do it, and honestly, if you like this effect, then go ahead. I encourage you to use it since it makes your life hella easy. But since I hate myself and is too much of a perfectionist, I like to do it manually. In my personal opinion, the program generated ones just look too unnatural. So instead, here's what you do. You Google screen tone Photoshop brushes, download a bunch, and try it out. Find the ones you like and do it manually with the good old multiply layer. Basically, make one more layer on top of your shading folder and clip to it, so that way everything you draw is within the shades. Then set that layer to multiply, set the color to shade number 3, and lightly brush over everything to create the effects. After that, feel free to add some bubbly effects or whatever you want, and you're done. Whew, that was a lot of information to take in. If you managed to stay to this point, I applaud you, and I sure hope you were able to learn something. In fact, I hope this whole series was able to teach you something and make you even just a little bit more confident to start one on your own. Thanks for listening, guys. If you're already part of the fan, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and check out my webcomic link below. If not, please do subscribe. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you lovelies around until next time.